Hi, so in this presentation, I will present our study on male and female strategies during interunit interactions in a band of Colobus and angolensis ruwenzorii. So obviously in the wild, groups can and usually do encounter each other, and that can lead to interaction between neighboring groups that can be more or less aggressive depending on the context and the species. And so the question is, who gets involved in these interactions and why they get involved? What is the reason for an individual to take the risk to get involved in these encounters that, like I said, can sometimes be highly aggressive? So what do they gain from that, basically? There has been hypothesis proposed in the literature to explain the reason behind these behavior, behind this involvement, and those hypotheses are the ones that we tested in this study. The main concept behind them is that involvement in encounters is linked to an individual's reproductive strategy, which brings us with hypothesis for female and hypothesis for male. Female are taught to initiate encounters and take part in intergroup interaction to gain or maintain access to food, so their involvement and level of aggression should be linked to the presence of food or feeding context. This is the main hypothesis for female. There is other ones to explain their involvement, but for the sake of time and in the presentation, I will not go through them in this presentation. They do not necessarily apply to every species, but you are welcome to ask questions on them after the presentation if you're curious about them. For male hypotheses, obviously, they are taught to initiate or take part in intergroup interactions to gain or defend their access to mates. And they can do that through obviously different strategies, like you see here. They can defend their access to mates by defending food resources, so indirect mate defense via food defense, to attract and keep females in their home range or in their group to keep access to them. In this case, their involvement should be related to the presence of food, so feeding context, and they should target both sexes because they are both a threat for feeding resources. They can directly defend the females, so their aggression in this case should be directed to male because they are the threat for their access to reproduction, and their level of aggression should be linked to the number of receptive female and the presence of all male unit. Or, if they want, they can try to attract female in their group to infanticide, which is a way to show their quality as a male, and then a female can transfer in their group. For our study, what did we do? So we tested these hypotheses, the female and male hypotheses, in a unique population of ruwenzorii and Colobus monkey. So indeed, this population formed a multi-level society which gives us the chance to study female and male strategies during encounter and group interaction in this specific context, and ultimately to see if that context can influence involvement of individual. So the multi-level society in our study population takes the form of a large band of 149 individuals. This band is composed of 14 core units. We have both unimale multi-female and multi-male multi-female core unit, and at the time of the study we had one all-male unit. So the core units are socially and spatially distinct, with most direct interaction being restricted to other unit members, so within the group. Unit also associate through time in close proximity in a fission dynamic, so units kind of hang out together, then split and can meet other units or meet again later. And within this structure, the unit and so the individual within this unit share the same resource and home range, which put them in a certain level of competition between each other, and such we can test these hypotheses. So to test these female and male strategies, we followed this population for a 3-month period. We followed one focal unit on each observation day, and all occurrences of encounters between core units were recorded. An encounter was defined as occurring when core units were seen actively initiating an interaction and when a significant change in the behavior was observed. So since the units associate through time and are physically close to each other, we could not define an encounter as two groups being within 15 meters of each other, which is the definition often used in the literature. When an interaction did occur, we record the ID of the unit that initiated, received, and win, the outcome for the winning and losing team, the context, which include the presence of food and feeding behavior within the previous 15 minutes, and the behavior during the encounter, which include the sex involvement, so individual involvement, and their level of aggression. So what did we find? For female hypotheses, we find that females were involved in 23.91% of interaction, that they were the one that initiated the interaction in 10% of the time, that when female got involved, it was in a feeding context 92% of the time, so most of the time there were food involved, and that they tended to be more aggressive in a feeding context, although that was not significant, but we do have a really small sample size because they only got involved in 24%, so maybe in a bigger sample size we would have a significant association. So we do think that it's still important to highlight that. So therefore, based on these results, female direct resource defense seems to be the main reason to explain the participation of females in inter-unit interaction. So the reason for female to participate will be the access to food. As for male, we find that when male were involved, it was in feeding context 68% of the time, that they targeted both male, female, and unit as a whole, and that through their involvement, they were able to gain access to food resources for their unit. Thus, the indirect mate defense seems to be one of the main explanations for the behavior of male in this population during interactions. However, they did target males more often than female, which could hint toward the use of the direct mate defense strategy as well. That being said, their level of aggression was not related to the presence of the all-male unit or the presence of receptive female, which means that it may not be the main reason that explained their involvement. And we did not find any evidence for mate attraction via infanticide. In conclusion, in this multi-level society of ruwenzorii, Angola, and Colobus, we find that involvement of female could be explained by the direct food defense hypothesis. We also find that the indirect mate defense seems to be the main explanation for male involvement in unit interaction, and we found little evidence for direct mate defense, although we do think that it occurs, and no evidence for attraction via infanticide. So, what about the multi-level society context? Did that had an impact? So in fact, the lack of evidence for the direct mate defense could be explained, we think, by the multi-level society context in which these interaction occurs. So we do have anecdotal evidence that suggests that unit association could be a way to directly defend mates. At 2 occasions during the study period, male of 2 different units attacked the all-male unit at the same time, and they did win the interaction, which hint toward the fact that association and not the level of aggression of an individual could be a better variable to evaluate this hypothesis in this population. However, more research will be needed to confirm the presence of direct mate defense in this multi-level society. Finally, I would like to thank the field assistant that made this study possible, as well as the Uganda Wildlife Authority, the Uganda National Council of Science and Technology, NSERC, and the University of Toronto for their support in the realization of this study. Thank you.